All right, 9 o'clock on your Thursday night, February 16th, and thanks for tuning in as we recap what happened in the courtroom today in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. The disgraced attorney accused of shooting and killing his wife and son in June of 2021. Now, after we go over what happened today, we're going to be joined by criminal defense attorney Taylor Bell. He's got the latest on the developments in the courtroom. We'll talk about that in a moment. But today in that courtroom, graphic testimony about the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdoch. This came from Chief Deputy Kenneth Kinsey, who is a crime scene expert with the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Department. He was called to the Murdoch property last fall to give investigators more information on how and where Maggie and Paul Murdoch were shot and killed. He testified that Paul was about 5 feet inside the feed room when he was shot the first time and had moved to the door frame when the second fatal shot was fired.
He was found outside the feed door. He fell over forward after sustaining that movement. Some wounds are fatal later. You can actually see someone that receives a fatal wound, and I've seen them run 100 yards. They can move for a little while. This is not that type of wound. Once he received this wound, it ceased all movement.
Well, jurors were also shown this picture of the feed room where Paul was killed. Kinsey added a green line to the photo showing what he believes was the angle of the second shot. This angle was questioned by defense attorney Dick Harpootlian.
That angle, you would agree with me, is an unusual angle. Typically, people shoot a shotgun from their shoulder.
Typically, unless you and I are both occupying nearly the same space.
Like that. But you would agree with me, I'm bent over to do that.
You are, yes, sir.
So the shooter was a very short person?
But here, I'm not bent over that far, and I'm almost 6 foot.
There was also testimony about how Maggie Murdoch died, several shots with a fatal wound coming from behind. Now, as you may recall, yesterday, Judge Clifton Newman ruled that questions about the Roadside shooting will be allowed in court. So this afternoon, the September 2021 incident was at the center of testimony. SLED agent Ryan Kelly took the stand. He interviewed Alex Murdaugh several times following the incident. Murdoch originally said that he had been shot in the head while changing a flat tire. Jurors heard Murdoch tell that story on a 911 call and a video taken in the ambulance on the day of the shooting. Take a listen.
I got a flat tire, and I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me. And when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me. Oh, okay. Were you shot? Yeah, but I'm okay. I'm going down the road. I had a tire go flat. I pulled over, and this car went by me. And I didn't pay a lot of attention. Truck, but then it turned around, came back. A real nice guy, acted like, and I turned my head, and boom.
A.J. Kelly questioned Murdoch several times following the shooting. On September 6, while still hospitalized in Savannah, Murdoch described a suspect in the shooting to a police sketch artist. Kelly says that at the time, Murdoch was able to call Curtis Eddie Smith. Through a phone number, agents were led to Smith. Kelly testified that SLED found thousands of dollars in financial records tracing back to Murdoch. Murdoch entered a rehab facility out of state. On September 13, 2021, Kelly arranged a phone interview with Murdoch with his attorneys Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin present. At the beginning of the interview, Harpootlian questioned Murdoch about what happened on September 4th.
The previous day, the news had come out about your embezzling or taking client money or law firm money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how would you describe your state of mind at that time?
I was in a very bad place.
What does that mean?
I thought it would be better for me not to be here anymore.
What do you mean by not be here anymore?
I thought that it would make it easier on my family for me to be dead.
And easier with some financial gain to your family if you were dead?
I have a fair amount of life insurance debt.
Do you remember how much?
Not off the top of my head, but like $10 million, $12 million.
Okay. And so you decided to end your life?
That's correct.
And tell these SLED agents how you went about arranging that.
I called Curtis Eddie Smith on the telephone.
Okay, now let's stop for a second. Who is Curtis Eddie Smith?
Curtis Eddie Smith is the primary person who I purchased pills from for years.
And some weeks you would give him how much money for pills?
I mean, it'd be in my records, but we had weeks where there would be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
I am being joined now by criminal defense attorney Taylor Bell for his take on what's going on with this trial. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk about what happened in the courtroom today. Mainly the prosecution playing these tapes pertaining to this roadside shooting, where you hear Alex Murdaugh with this story that he was shot while changing a tire, only to admit later in a SLED interview that he lied. So the juror sees today Alex Murdaugh discredited, and he's proved to be a liar in court today, correct?
That's correct. I wasn't sure that they were going to get into this initially, as Judge Newman originally stated and ruled from the bench that they weren't going to get into this. However, then he changed his mind, saying that the defense had opened the door to this information, and they were able to get into this information. It doesn't bode well for the defense here, having their client, being able to show videos of him telling two different stories.
And they get into it without putting Cousin Eddie on the stand. At least he hasn't been on the stand yet.
Yeah, I don't think, based on how they're presenting it, that he's going to get on the stand. I don't think that they need him. I think that's too much of a risk at this point. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I just don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna get on the stand based on what we've seen so far today.
Let's talk about the expert also testifying about how Paul and Maggie Murdoch were shot, how their lives ended. The jurors had already heard previous information about the shooting deaths, but today we find out that the fatal shot for Maggie Murdoch was from behind, which might indicate that she was trying to run away from the scene, correct?
It could indicate that. I thought, first, Kenley, I think it was,
right.
He discussed Paul's being shot, discussed the very first shot being from at a low angle, and a very sharp upward trajectory. I think there was a photo out there of during a break that Alex's attorneys were measuring him to see how tall he was. I'm not sure if that was for optics. I believe it was. I assume they already knew how tall he was. And so that, was part of cross there. And then we moved to the discussion that Waters had with the expert relating to Maggie. And I'm not sure I 100% agree with the drop down and then behind the shot. I'm not sure it all makes sense necessarily, but that's how. But he's the expert. He seemed pretty credible. Kind of sounds like he knows what he's talking about up there based on his credentials. So it is possible that the last shot came to the back of the head.
The prosecution had said that they were going to probably rest their case by the middle of the week. That was Wednesday. Wednesday came and went. Then they had testimony today. They said last night to some reporters in the field last night, we're going to wrap tomorrow. They didn't wrap today. So this is going into another day of testimony tomorrow with the state witnesses. If, and I say if, the state rests their case, say early afternoon tomorrow, would the defense begin immediately, or would they want to wait until Tuesday, since there is no court Monday, with it being President's Day?
I'm interested to see how long cross-examination is tomorrow. I believe that Mr. Harpootlian had said that it would be at least an hour or so or more. And if there's any further additional witnesses after that, I'm interested. I, having been in front of Judge Newman, he expects the lawyers to be prepared. I wouldn't say necessarily if this is the last witness, that he wouldn't expect the defense to go right into it. However, if there's a couple more witnesses, maybe one or two more, to tie a few things up, and it ended around noon or 1 or 2, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends it for the day and says we'll start with defense on Tuesday.
We've had so many people ask questions with this segment that we do every night. Some viewers wanting to know, why can't the jurors take notes in this case?
Well, that was Judge Newman's ruling. It's up to the individual trial judge. They get to make the decisions of whether or not they can take notes. From my perspective, I kind of don't necessarily want them to take notes because then they might write down one thing and then forget about other things because only that one thing was what they wrote down. It's when you're sitting in class and you take a note and then you get tired of taking notes, so you stop taking those notes and you just use, and well, that could happen.
Sure.
And so I'm not a big fan of it because, but then sometimes, you get them all together and they've got different notes. But it's up to the individual trial judge at the end of the day. For a long trial like this, I am a little surprised that there wasn't the ability to take notes here and collect them all at the end by the bailiffs,
Right.
and give them back out the next morning. But I am a little surprised given the length and the number of witnesses.
Do you believe that the jury has been overwhelmed with evidence coming from here? You've got the shooting deaths of Paul and Maggie Murdoch. You've got the alleged financial crimes of Alex Murdaugh. Then today you've got the 911 call. You've got the ambulance ride. You've got Alex Murdaugh sitting there giving an interview with a SLED agent, basically, with his arms crossed saying, well, you think I'm a suspect? I mean, so they've seen a lot. They've heard a lot. They've seen a lot. Is it a lot for the jury to comprehend right now?
I think they've been paying attention, based on what I've heard. They've been paying attention. However, I think it's a lot, but it was a lot that was necessary because this case all is circumstantial. There is no direct physical evidence necessarily linking Alex to this, and so I think it's the state's responsibility, as well as they want to make sure that there's no stones unturned so that the defense can come back and say they didn't do this. You've seen some of that throughout the trial of defense saying you didn't do this, but I think they're just trying to cover their bases, and they've done it chronologically. These incidences occurred, the roadside shooting, after everything else, so it's kind of been chronological, and I think it's necessary.
A lot of circumstantial evidence in this case, as you mentioned, but again, there's been audio played in court where witnesses have contradicted what he has had to say about he wasn't there. And then today, basically, they're playing tapes in court, proving again, as we started this broadcast, this interview off, proving that he has told lies. So, I mean, and when it comes to a jury, you don't have that physical hard evidence. You've got a lot of circumstantial evidence. But, the defendant there, well, we've caught him in a few lies already.
That's correct. And Criminal Defense 101, whether your client's innocent, whether your client did anything, you don't talk to law enforcement. You always have to understand that any little inconsistency, whether it's intentional or just happens to the way you tell stories, not everything always will line up. They're going to use that against you, and they're doing that right here. It also, I'm not sure Alex has been truthful about anything in this so far, and that's kind of being shown here today in the two different stories regarding the roadside, and that's been really devastating for the defense here.
You think the state scored some points today with all those tapes?
They definitely scored some points. However, from the direct circumstantial, it's not direct evidence that he committed those murders. It's circumstances of maybe why he lied, covered things up to show his deceitfulness, that circumstantially he covered the other stuff up too. So I wouldn't say it's direct that he committed the murders, but it's circumstantially it leads someone to believe that he did.
What's left for the state to present at this point, do you think?
I think they're about done. I do. The only possibility would be Cousin Eddie, and I don't think that he's going to get called to the witness stand. I am not sure there are any other crime scene investigators. They're closing out the chronology here today with this roadside shooting, and then the two different stories that were told, and just I think that's going to be the state's case here.
All right, so that's the state. Moving on to the defense, your criminal defense attorney. What is Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin going to present in the days ahead, do you think?
I'd expect there to be a counter expert in terms of firearms, a counter expert in terms of crime scene reconstruction, a counter expert in potentially forensic pathology, potentially character witnesses about Alex's character. Whether or not how many there are, I don't know. I assume maybe Alec. They may put him on the witness stand, but those what I would be expecting here is some experts to counteract the experts that have been used by the state.
Would the defense be taking a big gamble putting Murdoch on the stand? I mean, again, not to hammer it home, but he's been caught in a few lies already. So, would it be a big risk to put him on there?
It's always going to be a risk, but I assume from the get-go that the attorneys have started prepping him in the situation that they might have to put him on the witness stand. I always prepare my client in case he has to testify. Most of the time, those cases are self-defense cases, though. This case is not a self-defense case, so you don't have to tell his version of events. However, most juries are going to want to hear from him. He's been sitting there the whole time. They have all these unanswered questions, so they're thinking in their mind, well, these attorneys have mentioned all these other theories. Can't he explain that to us? Right. And if he doesn't, I think it's going to be held against him, even though the judge is going to tell them they can't hold his right to remain silent against him because he's already talked in these videos.
Exactly. He has done that indeed. All right. So again, as you mentioned, a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case has been presented. What do you think the biggest circumstantial evidence, so to say, has been presented that's the most damaging when it comes to Murdoch?
I'd still say the videos from the kennel, as well as the different change of clothing in the two different videos.
He again maintaining it's not him on there, and I guess he'll get a chance to explain the change of clothes, I suppose.
I guess. I mean, maybe the defense attorneys have something up their sleeve. They asked about, did y'all ever go look for these clothes?
Right.
Maybe they're somewhere. I don't know. I mean, that would be a big ace up somebody's sleeve if they just, here's some clothes. But I doubt it. I doubt that's there. However, I don't know. His attorneys are pretty slick guys.
So we're already 3 weeks and a day. Tomorrow will make 3 weeks and 2 days with witness testimony from the state. I don't expect, and I don't think anyone expects the defense to last that long, will they?
No, they won't last. I don't think more than 4 or 5 days.
Really?
I would push it to be that long. They don't have to tell the chronological story as the government did. They're coming in there to counteract the evidence that does not help them, which is the pathologist, which is the firearms expert, and which is the crime scene reconstruction expert, and then any witnesses that are there going to build the character of Alec.
Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I think that's good.
We covered it pretty well.
Yes.
All right. Testimony will resume 9:30 in the morning. And of course, you can watch several different ways from the Colleton County Courthouse. You can watch on WLTX Plus. You can watch on our YouTube channel. And we thank all of our viewers all over the world. I've seen some viewers from South Africa watching on YouTube. Thank you so much. Also, you can watch on WLTX.com. Tomorrow night, right here, we'll hope to see you then.